I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. When Amy Burroughs stepped in as CEO of Terns Pharmaceuticals, she not only had to fill a void created by the death of her predecessor, but also lead a strategic shift from an increasingly crowded area of metabolic disease to focus on its experimental therapy for chronic myeloid leukemia. The company's allosteric BCR-ABL inhibitor binds to a different site on the fusion protein than most first and second generation tyrosine kinase inhibitors. The data have the company and its investors believing the drug can reset the bar for both efficacy and tolerability in a multi-billion-dollar market. We spoke to Burroughs about reinventing the company, the decision to seek partners for non-core assets, and how she's charting a clear path forward toward a broader oncology future. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Danny, thanks so much for having me today. It's great to talk to you.
We're going to talk about chronic myeloid leukemia, Terns Pharmaceuticals, and the changes you've made there since you took the helm in 2024. You joined the company following the loss of the CEO, Sen Sundaram, to cancer in 2023. Why did you take the position, and what was compelling about the opportunity to you?
I did not know Sen. It was a tragic loss for the company, for his family and friends. And I really saw a company that had a void of leadership and had a great group of people and therapeutics that could really make a difference for people. And I had not known about it before, frankly, Russell Reynolds called me. And the more I learned about it, the more I met the board and some of the people and understood the potential of Terns 701 and our metabolic assets, the more interested I became.
Well, you made a strategic shift at the company away from its focus on metabolic disease and obesity to focus resources on advancing the company's lead program in chronic myeloid leukemia. What was the thinking there?
Well, Danny, I will say I don't want to take too much credit because we really followed the data. So when I started in February 2024, we were just starting to dose patients in chronic myeloid leukemia with Terns 701. So we didn't have any clinical data. We also were at the very early stages of looking at Terns 601 in humans. And so it really was a follow the data type of story. And as we saw Terns 601, our first trial looked good. We followed the data and did second trial. And as we saw the Terns 701 data evolve to be really looking like a best in disease drug and better than anybody could have expected, it was a pretty easy decision to focus there as we looked also at the landscape in metabolic disease and obesity, the players with large amounts of capital and a diverse set of assets. It was more difficult to compete, and we really saw that we had something incredibly special in Terns 701.
I don't think I could find a life science executive who wouldn't say they follow the data, but you were an outsider with no attachment to any of these programs. Was there convincing you had to do with the board? Were they on board with your strategy, or was this a plan that you were brought on to execute?
It really was neither. So it was, as I said, when I started February of 2024, the board was committed to looking at both programs. And as the data evolved, I think it became incredibly clear to all of us. There wasn't an attachment necessarily to the programs or metabolic disease because we'd always been there. It was really a pretty easy decision for us.
This was a company where there was an interim CEO for a brief 2.5-month period. What were the challenges of stepping into a company that was small enough that
everyone may have known the CEO, and it may have had a distinct culture and strategic plan. And what is it like to step into a situation like that and implementing a shift in strategy?
I really came in to learn from them and found that we had a tremendous group of people, and again, therapeutics with a lot of potential. There was because of the void of leadership and the fact that there hadn't been a long term CEO there for months, I felt incredibly welcomed by the people at the company who really were looking for a leader that could guide this company to the next stage of development. So I really listened. There were a lot of things culturally that I learned from that I found very attractive. So, for example, it was one of Sen's uh, practices at the senior leadership team meeting to start off with something that we call share good news. And everyone goes around the table and says something, whether it's personal or professional. I'm excited about this data. I'm excited about the concert that my son was in last week. I'm excited about taking a trip with my mom to go to this amazing place or something like that. That really helps people to connect both professionally and personally. So that was an example of something culturally that I really liked and adapted. And then I think every CEO has their own leadership style. And I found over time as we built our team that we have a team that's very much in line with the data driven and people driven culture that we are building, which is about not only about patients, but also about our employees and our mission to develop best in disease therapeutics.
Your lead experimental therapy is for chronic myeloid leukemia. How does the condition manifest itself and progress?
Chronic myeloid leukemia is a mutation in a fusion protein called BCR-ABL. So it's the fusion of BCR and ABL. And the level of disease is really measured by the transcripts, the amount of that fusion protein in the blood. And before 2001, when the first BCR-ABL inhibitor was developed, CML was a fatal disease. In fact, I lost one of my closest family members to CML. It would progress to a blast phase to AML and become deadly. Today, and after 2001, life expectancy is pretty good for CML patients. However, the therapies have a lot of limitations. Often 40 to 50% of patients in the front line have to progress to another therapy, not only due to efficacy sometimes, but often due to safety or tolerability considerations. So it's interesting that a lot of people think, oh, CML, that's really cured because it's not about overall survival. If you talk to patients, they will tell you that there's a lot of unmet need, that living with these therapies is not easy. And for some, they are not tolerable.
I was unaware of the personal connection. Does this give what you're doing more meaning?
Danny, that's part of the reason that I'm in this business to begin with, is because health is one of my highest values. And I find tremendous satisfaction from working in this area, particularly as I've gotten to know other people, new friends. I've actually found some old friends that I didn't know had CML, and they've really helped to make it real for all of us.
What is the prognosis for someone today with CML, and what treatment options exist?
So today with CML, most patients will be put on a BCR-ABL inhibitor in the front line and can expect to live a relatively normal life expectancy and be on these therapies for the rest of their life. They often won't die of CML. However, there are issues, particularly for patients who go on these therapies at a younger age. You can be diagnosed with CML in your 20s, in your 30s, 40s, 80s. The younger you are, the longer you have to be on these therapies, and the longer side effects such as arterial occlusive events. Having a stroke, one of the primary therapies can cause pleural effusion in about 30% of patients. Hypertension, pancreatitis. And so there are a lot of issues with these drugs that become secondary to their CML, but most patients have to stay on these therapies for life.
Terns lead experimental therapy is Terns 701. What is this and how does it work?
So it's a BCR-ABL inhibitor. It works a bit differently from the other therapies that are on the market to inhibit BCR-ABL. And what you want to do, as I was explaining from the beginning, is get those transcripts down to a low or practically undetectable level is where CML patients want to be. And ultimately the goal, some patients are cured of their CML. If they get to that undetectable level for 3 to 5 years, they can try going off drug and potentially living a normal life without CML and without CML therapies. Going back to our therapy, our therapy is a BCR-ABL inhibitor that that binds to the allosteric site on the BCR-ABL fusion protein. First and second generation agents were binding to the active site on the protein, meaning that they were less selective. So they hit off-target kinases that cause some of the issues that we were talking about a few minutes ago, like arterial occlusive events, pleural effusion, and allosteric inhibition is much more selective. There's another allosteric inhibitor that has been developed and approved that's shown to be safer than the other therapies on the market and more effective in some settings. And what we have recently showed is really the ability to raise the bar to the next level on safety and efficacy. The additional piece is that due to the fact that most patients have to take this every day for at least 5 years or the rest of their life, there's also a benefit to our therapy in that it can be taken without regard to food, where the other allosteric and some other therapies have to be taken while fasted, either once or twice a day. And that's a 3-hour fasting window. And for many patients, the rest of their lives, that can be very complicated and inconvenient and can even lead to efficacy issues if they're not compliant with their therapy.
How big an issue is the development of resistance to existing therapies? And by binding to an alternate site, does that resolve that issue in any way?
We do see that Terns 701 is more potent against a range of BCR-ABL mutations. At the same time, the first question you asked is how big of a problem it is. Interestingly, a lot of patients who fail due to efficacy, it's not necessarily due to a resistance mutations. It's actually a small minority. In our phase 1 Cardinal trial, only about 15% of these patients who've failed 3, 4, 5 or more therapies have resistance mutations. So it is a benefit that Terns 701 should be able to better cover many resistance mutations in CML. But the main benefit is really actually about having a more potent and more effective molecule up front so that hopefully patients don't develop resistance mutations.
And what's known about it from the studies you've conducted to date?
So the excitement around Terns has really come from the data that our investigators presented at ASH. And it really has raised the bar to a level that people did not expect. So, for example, with the best CML therapy out there today, in a patient population similar to what we have been studying, so generally third line plus patients, only about 25% of patients get to what's called a major molecular response, which is a reduction in those transcript levels to 0.1% or less. We actually showed 75% of patients were able to get to that level. So the best out there right now is 25%. We were able to show 75% at the doses that we're exploring in expansion. We were also able to show that we really haven't seen anything notable in terms of safety and tolerability, had a good safety and tolerability profile without some of the issues like hypertension and elevated amylase lipase that you see with the other allosteric, nor did we see some of the issues that you see with the active site inhibitors. And many patients and physicians have said to us that the safety component and the tolerability component is as, if not more important for many patients than the efficacy so that they can stay on their drug.
What's the development path forward?
So in CML, we can move from this phase 1/2 trial where we're looking at expansion, and we're expanding at 2 doses that are meaningfully different from a PK standpoint. So we'll take that to the FDA to meet the Project Optimus requirements to pick the best dose to take into phase 3, and we expect that by late 26, early 27, we should be dosing in our pivotal trial. These are relatively small trials, in the 250 or so patient range is what we saw with the other allosteric for their third-line plus trial. We're gonna be doing a second-line plus trial. And then we also expect to really see this, Danny, as a first-line drug, and we can move into a frontline pivotal trial relatively quickly.
And is the expectation that you would commercialize this on your own, or would you be seeking a partner to do that?
Our current plan is to move this forward and commercialize it ourselves. It's a relatively targeted market. And with our capital raise in December, we were able to raise sufficient capital that we could get through our pivotal trials and commercialize and launch this ourselves. Of course, we're always open to talking to partners and people about opportunities to get this faster to patients. We're confident in our ability to take this forward.
And are there plans to expand the oncology pipeline here?
So we've developed all of our own molecules at Terns. We have a great discovery research team. And so we are looking at oncology and other opportunities to meet unmet needs. We're not ready to guide to specifics on that.
So Terns did have a pipeline of obesity and MASH candidates. Two of these were at clinical stages. The lead candidate is 601. The phase 2 results reported in October didn't support further development of 601 for obesity. Prior to that, the company said it would not invest in metabolic disease going forward. Is there a plan to license these assets?
Danny, so Turn 601, we don't expect that asset to move forward in anyone's hands based on the data and the competitive environment. Turn 501, we think could be a best-in-class THR beta. We've shown some preclinical data in combination with GLP-1s. That's not a small endeavor in terms of that development program. So we've chosen to allocate our capital to Turn 701 in CML, and we are looking to license that. We also have a preclinical program for a GIPR antagonist that we call it the Turn 801 series. And we're looking for licensing opportunities for that also, because it really makes sense for us to focus on CML given the opportunity there with that asset. And it is something that I feel as CEO is important, is to keep the company focused and not try to do too many things well.
I think on the phase 2 results, your stock may have dipped below $7. It was certainly trading around there. And then since then, it's just soared on the results for 701. The company just priced an upsized public offering at around $40. You raised $748 million. What was the discussion with investors like?
When we put out the 601 data, it was really interesting because we didn't get a lot of questions. A lot of our core investors really saw the value in CML and Turn 701, and most of our analysts wrote about it as a clearing event. So our investors have been pretty thrilled as the Turn 701 data has emerged to be even better than they expected. I think they see that we're a team that can execute and move this forward quickly, and they've given us the capital to do so.
The amount you were able to raise here, I would say, is impressive in any market. It certainly was, given where biotech financing has been for the last several years. A lot of people have been looking at the activity in the second half and the fourth quarter of 2025 as signaling a change in the landscape for biotech. Do you think Terns is an outlier, or is this a sign of some bigger change in biotech financing?
I don't know that I'm qualified to make a judgment on that in terms of other companies. So, what I see here is investors following the data and investors seeing that this is a pretty special drug that has the potential to be best in disease in a multi-billion-dollar market. The probability of success of getting to market is high. The numbers that we put out with this drug are meaningfully different enough to be confident that this is going to be a better drug. And they also see that we are capable of taking this forward, and this amount of capital will get us to market without any type of financing overhang. So I think people really saw it as a special opportunity.
So what's the plan for 2026? What are the key things that you're going to be focused on executing?
We are going to look to choose our dose, meet with the FDA, and get this into pivotal trials. So it's really about execution. And we will be also putting out additional data so that investors and the community can see how these results hold up in a larger data set.
Have you started thinking about building a commercial organization?
A little bit early to specifically build a big commercial organization, but we do have a senior executive who's leading commercial, and we're doing a lot of commercial work in terms of understanding the needs, looking at positioning, and looking at access and payers. So, Danny, as you might know, I have a commercial background. I've spent a lot of my career making sure that companies think early about commercial preparations.
Amy Burroughs, CEO of Terns Pharmaceuticals. Amy, thanks so much for your time today.
Danny, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.